I'm Michon Boston.
And I'm Tequina Boston. Invite historical drama fans you know to subscribe to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters wherever they enjoy their favorite podcast. Subscribers receive notifications about new episodes and bonus content.
Sign up for our newsletter on our webpage at michonbostongroup.com/Boston Sisters or on our Instagram bio link at Historical Drama Sisters and receive news and announcements about upcoming podcasts and historical drama activities. Enjoy the podcast and thank you for listening. Welcome to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters, a podcast where we talk about historical films and dramatic series as windows to the past and mirrors of the present. I'm Michon Boston.
And I'm Tequina Boston. 2025 is the semi-quincentennial or 250th anniversary of the birth of British author Jane Austen. PBS Masterpiece kicks off the commemoration with the new 4-part series Miss Austen, based on the 2020 novel by Gill Hornby. Though there have been numerous television and film adaptations of Jane Austen's novels, Miss Austen is an original story by Gill Hornby, seeking to unravel the historic literary mystery of the burning of Jane Austen's letters by her older sister Cassandra Austen after Jane's death in 1817. Over 100 of Jane Austen's letters survive, and since letter writing in Jane Austen's time was as frequent as social media posting is today, one can only assume there were hundreds more letters the author wrote to her sister Cassandra and others. Was Cassandra justified in destroying Jane Austen's letters?
Miss Austen reimagines Cassandra's act of protection as a fascinating, witty, and heartbreaking story of sisterly love. Miss Austen begins in 1830, a while after Jane has died. Cassandra, played by Keely Hawes, races to see her friend Isabella, played by Rose Leslie, who is about to lose her home following her father's death. Cassandra is ostensibly there to help, but her real motive is to find a stash of private letters, which in the wrong hands could destroy Jane's reputation. When Cassandra finds the letters, she's transported back to her youth. The younger Cassandra, portrayed by Synnøve Carlson, and her sister Jane, portrayed by Patsy Ferran, navigate the infatuations, family feuds, and diminished hopes, which shaped their lives and became the foundations for Jane's unforgettable stories. Cassandra's remembrances of her life and relationship with her sister Jane help her guide Isabella through her hardships towards true happiness.
Our guest for this conversation about Miss Austen is Gill Hornby, the author of the novel on which the Miss Austen series is based. Gill Hornby is the author of the novels The Hive and All Together Now, as well as The Story of Jane Austen, a biography of Austen for young readers. Her subsequent novels, Miss Austen and Godmersham Park, were bestsellers for the British Sunday Times. Gill Hornby's latest novel, The Elopement, is set to be published in the United States later this year. Gill is currently president of the Jane Austen Society in the UK and lives in West Berkshire with her husband and 4 children.
Welcome, Gill, to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters.
Thank you for having me.
What motivated you to tell the story about what happened to Jane Austen's letters? I mean, what got you interested in writing fiction focusing on Cassandra Austen and other members of the Austen family?
Well, it's a sort of long story, as if the novel had been stalking me, actually, for about 30 years. That was when we first moved into this house in Kimpbury, when I was told that there was a Jane Austen connection to the house. And it's not really an Jane Austen connection, it's a Cassandra Austen connection, because she was engaged to the son of the vicar who lived here. And it was the sort of perfect match, and everybody was delighted with it. And then tragedy intervened, and she was never to marry. And I sort of read up a little bit about that. I mean, before we moved here, I didn't even know Jane Austen had a sister. I was immersed in the novels, but not at all in the life. And then I thought about her. She was here on her first Christmas away from her family to stay with her in-laws. Always a tricky time in anybody's life. And then in January, sort of before dawn in the cold, she came downstairs wrapped in a shawl to say goodbye to her fiancé before he went off to the other side of the world. And and she never saw him again, and she slightly haunted me from that point. I must mention that we don't live in the same house, but because that was pulled down, but it is the same, footprint of the house, and the garden's the same, and the gate is the same, and, so I thought of her a lot here. It's kind of very atmospheric. And then, I have always been fascinated by the women in history, which was nearly all women, whose destiny was to get married and have children, and then they didn't. So how did they make it through from the point of disappointment or acceptance to death? Some women had money, but very, very few. Money went down the male line, and it was very hard for women to earn money. And so they had to improvise an existence for themselves. So I thought about her often and rather sort of developed a crush on her. I looked on her as rather a heroic figure because I knew she lived on to her 70s. And how she did that with sort of precious little money, I didn't know. Then I was asked to write the biography for children that you mentioned of Austen. And I read the biographies and was rather astonished to discover that they all hated her. All biographers hate Cassandra, this person I was worshipping rather, because she burnt the letters. And then I read the memoirs of the nieces and nephews who all gave Cassandra very short shrift because Jane had been very sensible and died at 41 and therefore could be remembered as a kind of brilliant young woman and genius and all the rest of it. And Cassandra lived on and they saw her as a joyless old stick, which really wasn't very fair, actually. And then I read Jane's letters, the 161 that Cassandra has let us have, Jane's letters to Cassandra, and saw that Jane herself worshipped Cassandra.
Ah.
And I thought, well, there we are. Everybody else has got an axe to grind, but this one person who really, did not suffer fools at all, didn't suffer many people, actually, Jane Austen. She was quite intolerant of the faults of others, although she was never faultless herself. Um, I just worshipped her. So it really started, I wanted to make the case for Cassandra, and the best way to do that was in fiction. Because there are so many holes in the life that where we do not know what was going on, that I could invent them all. So it's a propaganda novel for my girl, Cassandra.
So you're in the Cassandra club. Now,
I'm a fangirl of Cassandra.
so there were 106.
And now Keeley Hawes has played.
Oh, great. So there were 161 letters.
Yeah, as a
Okay.
yeah, there were that she let through. So we know from those that there was nothing that Cassandra minded us knowing about. That's what we know from them. Um, that they have been it's been sanitized. It was quite a common thing in those days, legacy management. You could destroy the evidence of people's lives or the evidence of half of their lives or the dark side of their lives because it was physical. We can't do that now. We lose control the minute where we go on a device. But then you could. Fanny Burney, for example, I think it was her daughter-in-law, went through all her unbelievably indiscreet diaries and letters and went through them all with a pen to score out what she didn't want us to read. But now, of course, the British Museum can X-ray all of that. And so we can just find it out anyway. Whereas Cassandra, because she was so diligent, burnt them all, and we can never know what she was burning.
We've heard from several book authors about their experiences of having their work adapted for film or television, or we've heard from fans also who usually are not as happy, some are pleased. It's a gamble. But tell us about your experiences in the adaptation of your book into this series, Miss Austen. How were you involved in that process?
Yeah, it's been dreamy. A very incredibly sympathetic producer bought it in manuscript and she optioned it, and which was delightful and encouraging, but I never thought it would come to the screen because nothing ever does, even though our screens are full all the time. There's nothing ever seems to get made. Everything gets stuck in production. Um, and then it was helped very much by the fact that COVID came along, so nobody could work and everybody could kind of focus on the future. So many projects were binned, I think. And then, and also the writer's strike in at your end, because it meant that suddenly lots of people were free. Um, and so it suddenly all came together. The scripts were written and Masterpiece came in, which was great. And then it was only the summer before last, late summer, that Keeley Hawes said yes, she'd play Cassandra. And once she came on in the August, they'd started filming in November. I mean, it was all because once she came in, everybody else came swimming in. And it was just dreamy, really. It was not an expensive shoot. It was quite a kind of tight budget, like everything is these days. But I think it looks extremely classy on it. Yes, I hung around set because who knows if it's ever going to happen again as long as one lives. And it was absolutely marvelous.
As we were reading the novel and watching the series, a theme that came through strongly, and I think this comes through strongly in Austen in general, is how precarious the financial situation of unmarried women in Jane Austen and Cassandra Austen's lifetimes was, and how dependent they were on the generosity of their male relatives or married or widowed female relatives. I guess in the Austen's case, it was the in-laws, the sisters-in-law. And this really resonated with um, me as a woman in the 21st century and Cassandra's situation, not partnered, not married, with a few more options, I would definitely say, probably quite a bit more options than, Cassandra and Jane Austen. But as you were researching and writing this novel, what were some of the similarities that you saw between the women in your story and women today? And what were some of the things that you saw as, "Oh, we don't have to deal with that one anymore?"
Um, yes, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think all of Austen's novels are, in fact, about the poverty of women, but we don't necessarily read them like that because we don't see poverty quite in that gendered way, I suppose, because we can be educated and we can work and we can have our own bank accounts and we're allowed to have our own money. And so we don't quite understand it. But the Bennet girls, for example, in Pride and Prejudice, they have nothing. And they are extremely vulnerable at the beginning of the novel, because if they lose their house, they lose everything. So that's really what Austen novels are about, and we don't quite read it as such. But we all obviously we have so many more options. We're not at the complete behest and control of our parents anymore. I've just finished a third Austen novel, which really is about paternal tyranny, and it is quite extraordinary how a girl and then a woman has no rights whatsoever against the men in her family. And there were so many things, there wasn't the Married Women's Act, didn't come until much later. So when you did get married and your father would settle money on your head, but then it went straight to your husband and he could do with it what he liked. He could give it to his mistress or put it on the roulette table or drink it all away. And when he died, it wouldn't necessarily come back to you. And so all of those things, I think I had stressed them in my novels much more than Austen does in hers, because for her readers, contemporary readers, it was a given. But for ours, I think I have to keep hammering home that for a reasonably well-bred woman, what we over here call middle class, if everything went pear-shaped, which it very easily could, then you had almost nothing. You could be a governess if you had an education. You couldn't go into service. Nobody wanted some posh girl around the place being hopeless. The other thing was prostitution, you know? And the prostitution population of London in Regency times was phenomenally large, with everything from 8-year-old girls to sort of genteel, middle-aged gentlewomen. Um, so I do stress it. I think it still matters to us, obviously, if we marry, who we marry. It's still marriage was a very difficult thing in those days. There was an awful lot steeped against it. You couldn't get out of it, for one thing. But still, it's an important thing now, because even though you can walk away from a marriage, that is a life-defining experience. And parenting is a life-defining experience. So I think why Jane's novels live on so strongly is because nothing much really has changed in that fundamental way. It still matters who your parents are, who your neighbours are. We've all got a sister, we've all got an aunt. We all fall in love or don't fall in love, and these are crucial moments in our biographies. So it's everything that we understand, I think, but we do have more options and we have more agency.
Mm. I definitely felt that anxiety of lack of options for Cassandra in your novel when I was
Yeah.
reading it.
Scary time for them.
Yeah.
It was a properly scary time for them.
And for Isabella as well.
Yes. Yes, terrible. Terrible. You see, when the man went, the house went. And that's what Mrs. Bennet is so hysterical about at the beginning of Pride and Prejudice, because people just dropped off their perch at any moment in those days. A cold could carry you off. And Mr. Bennet's just sitting in his study, not giving a damn. And she's got 5 daughters. And Austen makes a point of telling us that they're not educated. So they wouldn't have been governesses because they'd have been hopeless. So what was to become of them? And she's always played in these endless adaptations. I see there's another one coming down the pike.
Yes.
As a complete figure of fun. And I don't think she is. I don't think she was a figure of fun. Of course, she's faintly ridiculous. But to the contemporary female reader, they would have been absolutely rooting for her. She saw the problem, she addressed it, and she solved it. So really, she's the heroine of the novel.
One question I have about the money as I was reading your book, I was like, what is wrong with their brother? Why can't he take his parents in and his sisters? They've got all that room, there's plenty of room for everyone. What was the problem?
He had 36 cottages at his disposal. This is purely my intuition. There's nothing on record. But when he did finally give them a cottage into which Jane and Cassandra settled, and in which Jane had the 8 happiest years of her life and fired off 6 of the greatest novels in the English language before she was struck down, when she got there, the first thing she did was revise the manuscript of Sense and Sensibility that she's been carrying around with her. And that begins with, I don't know if you remember, the Dashwood sisters, their fathers died, and their
Yeah.
brother and snotty sister-in-law have taken over the house. And it's the sort of division of spoils. And he says, perhaps we should give them a cottage. Oh, they don't need a cottage. What would 2 ladies do in a cottage? And then it says here they're to have the furniture and the table. Well, they don't need a table if they haven't got a cottage. And they don't need the china if they haven't got a table to put it on. And why on earth would they need any linen? And so they're left with absolutely, a tiny cardboard box to take off a Napoleon trap. I rather feel that this was Elizabeth Austen's role, who was the wife of the very rich brother, because they gave them nothing when she was alive, and the minute she was dead, they got a cottage. And it's a jolly nice cottage. It's a jolly nice cottage. And I feel that scene is there for Jane and Cassandra's Benefit, the only two who would have seen it like that or noticed it even to being like that, and that they were amusing themselves with that sister-in-law in Sense and Sensibility.
Well, well, well. That
That is my detection.
okay.
It sounds pretty reasonable to me.
Yeah, the plot thickens. Well, there's another theme in your novel that's really, I think, very important is the bond between sisters. And you talked about, earlier, the closeness between Jane and Cassandra, and that the letters that remain reflects that. You were filling the gaps of that closeness because there's been so much criticism about Cassandra, and she's being portrayed as the villain by destroying Jane Austen's letters. How can this relationship model sibling relationships? Because people are always talking about fighting with their siblings, or I don't get along with my sister, I don't get along with this person. We just had a siblings day in the United States, so this is topical.
Yes, well, yeah, exactly. Um, I think I do think I see it with my own children, because I've got 4, that they can happily fall out with one another, and I think it's the luxury of having so many siblings that they do it, and I think it may be a luxury of a comfortable life to go to war with your siblings about mostly it's minor stuff, isn't it? Somebody's got the hump about something or other. Um, Jane and Cassandra did not have that freedom. They were 2 girls, with 6 brothers. They were the unmarried ones. They were the ones without, who couldn't just go off into the world and make their fortunes. They had to have each other, and Jane was a very vulnerable creature. That is really what I take away from the letters and from the burning of the letters, is that she was very vulnerable and prone to melancholy. And Cassandra was very stalwart and noble and dedicated to her. And that was the other reason, really, why I wanted to write the novel, because it became clear to me that if Cassandra had married, she'd have been dragged off by her husband to God knows where. And she may not have had room to take Jane in to live with her. And she wouldn't have time to pay the same attention to Jane that she paid to her over the years. And then Jane would have been on her own. She would either have had to marry the first Mr. Collins nightmare that came along, but actually she was never spoilt for choice. It wasn't like she was turning them down in their droves. She was quite an awkward catch, really. Or she'd have been on her own, and then she couldn't write. But with Cassandra by her side, Cassandra navigated their course through to getting this house together. And once they finally got this house together, she said to Jane, right, I've got your writing desk back. You sit down, you write. I'm going to run the house. Mama's going to dig the garden. Our friend Martha's going to run the kitchen, and you are going to work. And so in that role, she played the sort of great man's wife kind of
Yes,
thing
I was thinking
that
the same thing.
Great women never have a great man's wife. So, but Jane did, and it kind of explains her industry, because as I say, it was to turn out she only had 8 years left to her. And in that time, it was the most extraordinary creative flowering that I think has been unrivaled possibly in history, to turn out 6 masterpieces in your own pen, not even using a word processor in that amount of time. And so that's what I think, that we should just all be on our knees to Cassandra, to thank her for having sacrificed so much in order to let Jane go through, to get her through to being a published author. Because if Jane had married, she wouldn't have married a rich man. It wouldn't have been Mr. Darcy. And she'd have died in childbirth, almost for certainly, because they nearly all did. Of their sisters-in-law, only 2 didn't die in childbirth, and they only had 1 or 2 children. The others died on their 8th, their 10th, and their 11th children. As we now know, Jane's health was fragile. She wouldn't have made it through. She also would have been running a busy household and wouldn't have had time to write more than a letter. and would probably have gone quite mad, I think, if she hadn't had that creative outlet. So it's all thanks to Cassandra that she was managed. People always talk about Jane as poor spinster, a poor spinster who never knew love. Well, actually, she had the best life she could possibly have had. She knew she was a genius. She knew she was brilliant. She had to write. She was an existential writer in that sense. And so when she couldn't write, when they didn't have a house of their own, she really fell into depression, and she carried these sort of draft manuscripts around in a box, but never even took them out in 5 years. She was too depressed. Um, so there we are. She has the best possible happy ending that she could have had, because she had a roof over her own head with female company, with no man stomping in demanding dinner at a certain time or saying he's invited the lawyer to dinner. And it was as much freedom as a woman of her age and social class of that time could possibly hope for.
You're elevating Cassandra even higher in my esteem, and it just makes me think about not only their bond as sisters, but Cassandra as the example of the extraordinary sister friend who made it possible for Jane to, and it's a great love. It's a love story that you're telling us.
They're always saying that, she was a spinster who never knew love and who invented all these romances in her novels. Well, the romances were piffle, and the great love was Cassandra.
I'm getting a tear in my eye.
Yeah.
Well, don't you two fall out about anything.
If we made it this far.
Yeah, believe me. We're quite close. Yeah. Well, one of the conversations that's come up in social media was about the casting of Alfred Enoch as the physician Dr. Lidderdale. And the buzz is about the fact that he's a Black doctor in the UK during that historical period, the 19th century. What are your thoughts about how this casting takes the story even beyond the class differences? What does it add to the understanding of social class and marriage in the UK during the times of the Austen family? And for those of you who don't know this, doctors were not esteemed professions. Physician was not an esteemed profession in Jane Austen's time. So talk a little bit about your thoughts on that.
It wasn't. Well, the whole social media discourse I find extremely tiresome. He's a terrific actor and incredibly hot. And he adds an awful lot to the story. And honestly, why shouldn't he be in work? These people drive me mad. But yes, the plot turns on the fact that Isabella's father disapproves terribly of her relationship with this man. And so it does rather, perhaps it does underline that sort of guess who's coming to dinner kind of element, perhaps, that makes it more understandable. But I would say, number one, he's a terrific actor and he's hot. So that's what I'd say.
I actually think it's one of his best roles.
I do too.
Yeah, there's a sensitivity he brought that I just love.
Oh my God, those eyes. He's gorgeous, I think.
And we've seen him grow up from Harry Potter.
And hasn't he done well?
Yes. Yes. Jill, one of our guests has been Damianne Scott. She has a site called Black Girl Loves Jane. She's a member of the Jane Austen Society in the USA and has presented for the Jane Austen Society. And one of the things she says is Jane Austen is for everyone. What makes Jane Austen so global? Everyone has either interpreted some of her stories.
Even zombie versions of Pride and Prejudice.
I've seen a South Asian one.
Yes. It really, actually, a friend of mine's a teacher. And there's always a backlash over here about having to thrust 19th century classics down the throats of sort of 15-year-old kids, sort of thing, as if it's a bad thing to do something that's a bit complicated from time to time. But anyway, and so, trying to make the curriculum easier and all of this. But she teaches in a mainly Asian school in East London and finds that the girls have an enormous affinity to Pride and Prejudice just because of the sort of class system and the parental control thing and the arranged marriage thing and all the rest. They really get it. They get it. As for all of us, everybody else, as I said before, she is writing about the domestic, and we all live in the domestic. And none of that really has changed. I mean, our houses look different, and we don't have as many servants, but it hasn't changed. They're about family life and community life. She said 3 or 4 families in a country village is the very thing to work on. And she's completely right. It's the stuff of soap operas still today. It is what makes soap operas go. You take 3 or 4 families, connect them to a hospital or a city centre or something, and off you trot. You get from that as much laugh and war and fortunes rising and falling as you could possibly want. The love stories are very eternal. They all follow the pattern of, rejection, second chance, love at first sight, the boy next door. All of these things are there. And then she does what so many of her contemporaries, and actually so many, it amazes me, contemporary writers who should be great, forget to do, which is she made jokes. And the thing about her is she's funny, and life is funny. And even if you're at a funeral, you end up roaring with laughter at some because we're human, and it's what divides us from animals is that we laugh. I'm sent so many, or I just read so many novels which ought to be better than they are, but they do not at any point address the humor in human existence. Um, and I think that's really got her a very long way, is that anyone can chuckle at those jokes.
Yeah. The other topic she explores that everyone can relate to is class. Who's in,
Yeah.
who's
Oh,
out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that hasn't gone at all. Yeah. And look at Clueless. I mean, absolute
Yeah.
completely perfect.
For sure. Now, I'm reading your second Austen-focused novel. Is it Godmersham Park? How's that pronounced?
Mission Park,
Okay.
yes.
Um, and you mentioned that you finished a third novel.
I have, and that will be with you in the autumn,
All
and
right.
that's called The Elopement.
So are you done with the Austens, or are you just finding infinite possibilities for
It's
stories?
infinite. It's infinite, I'm very pleased to say. Um, I always want to write about family, 3 or 4 families in a country village. That's what my first 2 novels were contemporary, and that's what I did. And then I hit on the Austens, and really, because it was such an enormous family, the original family was 10, 8 children, 2 parents, 8 children. And then, I don't know, 29 nieces and nephews, and then everybody went on to have another 10 children after that. The drama, um, the excitements, the everything, the tragedies that go on in a family that size, I find them all fascinating. Plus, they're all sort of super intelligent and they're just very, very interesting people. I absolutely love them.
Well, I wanna say, as I'm reading your novels, I also see that kind of wit and humor that you inject into the stories as well. And there's something about the way you write that makes me think about Jane Austen, but at the same time, it's your own distinct voice. I'm really enjoying your work.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. That's lovely to hear.
And I look forward to catching up to my sister and reading
Yeah.
your Austen novels. Jill, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation about Miss Austen on historical drama with the Boston sisters.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay.
Yeah. And we hope that as more of your novels reach the screen, we'll have another opportunity to talk with you again about the Austens.
Yeah, see you next time.
You can catch the 4-part series Miss Austen, based on the novel by Gill Hornby, Sundays starting May 4th on PBS stations. Check local listings. You can also stream the series on PBS Passport, the PBS Masterpiece Prime Video channel, and for free for 14 days from broadcast on pbs.org/masterpiece. Miss Austen and other novels by Gill Hornby, inspired by Jane Austen's family, are available from our affiliate bookstore. Go to our webpage at michonbostongroup.com/Boston Sisters or the podcast description for the link. Your book purchases support Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters podcast with a small commission and independent bookstores in your community.
Subscribe to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters wherever you enjoy your favorite podcast. Leave a review. Michon and I hope you'll give the podcast 5 stars. Sign up for the e-newsletter to stay up to date on new podcasts, bonus episodes, and historical drama-related resources and activities. You can find the link on the webpage as well. Follow us on Instagram at Historical Drama Sisters and on Facebook at Historical Drama Boston Sisters. Like and share Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters on your social media.
This is Michon Boston.
And this is Tequina Boston.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters, a podcast about historical films and series dramas. Visit our webpage at michonbostongroup.com/Boston Sisters.
Tell us what historical dramas you're watching. Who knows? We may do a show about it. Sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the podcast, and share it with the people you know who binge on historical drama.
Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters is brought to you by the Michon Boston Group. The views and opinions expressed on Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters are those of the speakers and do not represent the positions or views of the Michon Boston Group, its clients, or affiliates. This is Michon Boston.
And this is Tequina Boston. Thank you for listening.